O'clock. We will begin this meeting of the Chelmsford Planning Board. I'm the chair, Deirdre Conley. Just a couple announcements. This meeting will be televised and recorded and will be available subsequently on Chelmsford Telemedia. And if the video goes down, we will continue the live meeting. And we are tonight missing Mike Walsh. Joel, to my knowledge, is coming. We'll start off with public input, which is limited to statements regarding issues within our jurisdiction, but which are not currently the subject of a pending public hearing. If anyone would like to speak in public input, seeing none. Assume there's no one on the Zoom call? Evan?
Not indicating that they want to speak.
All right, next up we have Jackson Road, request for lot release, lots 1 to 5.
It's actually 1-5.
1-5, correct.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
Casey Ferrer with Howard Stein Hudson. Tonight I have with me Kathy Farrell from Farrell and Robbins, and also the applicant Wendland Liu of North Star Realty. So we were here before this board, I think it was last January, where we received releases for 5 of the last 6 lots. We bonded out the rest of the work and had an agreement with DPW that 1 lot shall remain held by this board through the bond until all work was completed. At this time, the only work remaining to be completed is state work within the state's right-of-way. Unfortunately, we've been held up permitting that for about 1.5 years. We first approached them about 1.5 years ago to request how to remove the driveway that's in their right-of-way. That's the scope of the work we have remaining, is just removing about 200 square feet of driveway. So, you know, our proposal here and what we've talked to DPW about is to leave in place the $385,000 bond that the town is holding. And again, that's money that was collected from the sales of the previous lots closings, put in a bank account, basically protected so that the only people who can withdraw it are the town if they need it, or it can be returned back to the applicant. So we're leaving in place the $385,000. The scope of work should cost less than $20,000. So we're proposing to leave in place almost 20 times the amount of money to be able to fund this. All we're requesting is that we release lot 5 so that we can sell the final property and get those buyers in just before Christmas. Hey, Joel.
okay. We're talking about lot 5, Joel on Jackson Road. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
Pretty routine, let's just do it. Move we,
DPW memo, do we need to read that, or is that just
Sure.
understood that? From Public Works, the Department of Public Works was requested by Howard Stein and Hudson to review as-built and comment on the final lot release of Lot 5 at Jackson Road. The DPW has reviewed the as-built, showing the substantial completion of the project, and can confirm that the following DPW inspected work remains outstanding on the project. 1, old driveway removal and restoration at Groton Road and Mass DOT right-of-way. 2, all streetlights need to work and be energized. 3, driveways need to work so that the roadway water does not flow from the street onto private property. DPW to inspect and confirm during a rainstorm. 4, clean up trash and construction debris across entire site until final work is complete and final acceptance occurs. 5, as-built and certifications fully reviewed and approved by DPW. The applicant has requested that the final lot, Lot 5, be released, and they will maintain in place the current existing bond of $385,000 until all work is finished. With that said, the DPW can confirm that the remaining work would cost less than the current bond of $385,000 It is DPW's understanding that the applicant is requesting the lot to be released so they can get occupancy as well as sell the remaining 2 units on Lot 5 per the Planning Board decision on Jackson Road and signed September 23rd, 2020. It states under section prior to issuance of occupancy permit that all proposed improvements within subdivision roadway be completed prior to the issuance of the final occupancy permit, and the as-built plan and letter should be provided prior to the issuance of the final occupancy permit. Neither of these points has been fully satisfied as shown in the list of outstanding work above. With that said, DPW approves of Lot 5 being released as long as the current bond of $385,000 remains in place until all work is completed. As for the occupancy of the 2 units on Lot 5, this decision is to be determined by others.
I'll give you a motion if you want it.
Well, I just want to comment, the only question I had was the cost of the work remaining, and you answered that, because my concern was that if it was close to the 380, if this went on for 2 years, the cost may increase above the bond, but with it, that much difference, I have no concerns.
Do we have any kind of an estimate of when
When?
the work will be able to proceed?
I'm hoping by spring because we're aiming for Springtown meeting road acceptance. So that's our goal right now for timeline. But being MassDOT, I cannot guarantee that in any way.
Okay, anyone else? Take a motion?
Okay, I move that we grant the release of Lot 1.5 on Jackson Road.
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Is it unanimous?
Do we, is Mike on? Mike's not coming, right?
Mike's not coming.
Okay.
Peter, did you vote? Yeah. Oh, I didn't catch that. So it was unanimous?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
next up, we have a request for a major modification at 65 Dunstable Road, formerly 61 Dunstable Road. Owners Christopher and Kelly Sullivan are requesting a major modification to a previously approved site plan and special permit, and a new special permit for the construction of a 2-unit residential building and associated site improvements. The property is located in the CD General Commercial Zoning District, is shown on Assessor Parcel ID Map 9, Block 10, Lot 7, consisting of approximately 0.32 acres. The applicant requests approval under Article 21, Community and CEIOD, and subsections 195-111C, Section 195-11D5, and 195-115.C, and any other permit relief as may be required.
Madam Chair, may I begin?
Yes,
Oh,
please
Madam
do.
Chair, members of the board, good evening. For the record, Douglas DeShane from Finner and Nicholson, here representing Chris and Kelly Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan is here with us this evening. Also with me, John Riley, our engineer on the project, here. The board may recall that a couple years back, the board approved the development of a two-bedroom units on this lot, which was located within the CIOD. And we were able to obtain the permits necessary to build this 2-unit building. However, at that time, we were under the understanding and direction that we would have to build a on-site septic system to support these units. And that really dictated the original orientation of the building. If you'll recall, the building was oriented so that the driveway came down a side and you curved in to the driveways, to the garages under. Certainly not an ideal design, but again, you know, when you have to put a septic system in, it really dictates what you can do, especially on a lot of this size. However, subsequent to that, it was determined by the sewer department that in fact this site lot is in fact eligible for a sewer connection up to 500 gallons. And whereas this was a two-bedroom, 2 units, where our sewer would be 440 gallons, thereby meeting their requirements and allowing us to connect to sewer. So not having to build a septic system gave my client the opportunity to reconfigure the building and to realign it so that it would become a front-facing residential structure in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood. I'd have to go back and check, but I think at that point, we were the only residential structure that was going to have this kind of little funky side load. So we were able to orientate the building facing forward. As you can see, we're proposing 2 parking spaces in addition to the under garage. So we are now having 3 spaces. That one change, however, triggered a need for another special permit, in which we've applied for, because in the COID district, even though it's a residential use, the COID wants to see parking to the rear. So we believe that reorienting the building, making it look more like the neighborhood in that it faces forward with a forward-facing garage and parking in front, is certainly justification for that additional permit. We also made what I believe to be other improvements to the project that make it more beneficial to the neighborhood. You may recall that the original building that was approved was just under 45 feet because that was the allowed height within the COID. However, in working with staff and with his engineers and architects, we've been able to bring the height of the new building down to 35 feet. So while it's still within the COID, it now conforms to your residential heights. Again, making this building more conducive to a residential neighborhood. I will also mention we've actually slightly reduced the footprint of the building. So the footprint is even slightly reduced from what was approved previously. So we believe that these changes have really made this a better project for the neighborhood. It's really going to look better, more conforming with our neighbors. And I will recall that, just recall please, that when we first got this approved, we did a lot of work with our neighbors. And the neighbors were very gracious in cooperating with us because, quite frankly, they didn't want to see this lot developed in a commercial manner. They wanted residential, and therefore they were willing to, support the project that you approved at a much higher height and a slightly larger building. So, again, I'm happy to go. In fact, I'm sorry, I should go over the site plan with you a little so that what you can see. Evan, do you? Yes, here we go. Thank you, Evan. As you can see, this picture depicts exactly what I've described. The building now faces forward, parking in the front. I will also say that the building meets the setbacks, the front yard setback requirement, and will be consistent with other houses along the road. And, being able to eliminate that septic system has allowed us to really make it a better site overall. It's going to provide a much better backyard area for the units. And again, they're 2-bedroom units, so then, they're not 3 or 4, they're 2. If we could just jump to if you'd like to see the architectural plan.
Yep, give me a moment.
Yep. Thanks, Evan. So again, front facing, 2 units side by side, 1-car garage. And if you look at the bottom picture to the left, that I think depicts for you what the street facade will look like. pretty balanced. In fact, as balanced as a two-unit can be. Mirror image, and again, with the garage doors facing front. And we have provided 2 additional spots in the driveway. So I'm happy to answer any questions and you might have. I hope the board agrees that all in all, this is a better project. It's lower, it's smaller, and it's more consistent with the neighborhood. And so we're hoping to move forward with this plan.
Any questions, Mike?
Well, okay, we've got a couple of things going on here. Some of this falls under CO'd approval, as I understand it, and some of it, does it require reapproval there, or is the CO'd part of this all complete?
It's entirely CO'd.
Yeah, right. But then there's the approval of that, and then there's the special permits.
The special permit gets wrapped into the CO'd.
Okay, so we can do this all as,
Yep.
as one operation. Okay. Seems reasonable enough.
How much did you reduce the
10 feet.
10 feet? That's what I thought you said.
We were under the 45-foot requirement, and we're now at the 35-foot residential limit.
Can you walk me through how that is possible? Because I'm looking at the old designs. That was 2.5 stories with a larger footprint. The new plans are 4 stories with a smaller footprint.
And this one, the garage.
How is it shorter?
Right.
I'm trying to figure out how a 2.5-story building is taller than a
Well,
4-story
I
building.
suspect, and I saw this as well, I wasn't sure where that matrix number of 2.5 stories came from.
Because it's still in the plans.
It's in the new plan. Just went over it with the engineer a minute ago and said, how is this a 2.5-story building? And it's not. But to answer your question the best I can, if you look at the architectural drawings where we define the height for you, you can see that, if I may, we are identifying. Where's the one that was the front? Oh, this one works. So if you add this up, you'll see that this is just over 32 feet to here. And from this point to here is where the extra 3 feet are, is here. That's the only answer I have because I have to rely on these, the architectural plans. I'm not sure what they did to modify this, but I suspect what they've done is that they've worked with, with the height between the stories and also the roof pitch is where you can generally pick up, additional, a reduction in heights.
Don't we,
But the plan before you is this one, which shows a 32-foot to here, and then we've, based on our review this morning, it's, that's what gets us to the 35, is that extra peak.
and how high is the peak?
35 feet?
No, you said there was 3 feet in that little piece?
Yeah. It's,
3 or?
right, that's what we've estimated. Because we were told, again, we're not required to go down to 35 feet in this zone, but again, I know that when we were discussing this project with staff and our engineers, it was suggested that to be able to lower the building to be closer or to meet that residential requirement would be beneficial to the neighborhood, and so we're committing to you on the plans and in our application that we will meet that 35 feet.
Where do we have the dimensions on the other one?
What was that?
I'm just looking at the prior.
Are we questioned out?
No, I've got a few others. Evan, on the sewer capacity, I thought the department was approving sewer capacity for lots that already had sewer connections and then increasing.
Yeah.
This is a new building.
Do we want to read the memo? I don't know if it articulates it in their memo or not.
I didn't see it in that memo.
My understanding, and the applicant can speak to some more detail, is that the game changer from the original approval to now is that DPW went back into their files, and prior to the sewer limitation regulation being instituted, many years ago, this property had paid for a sewer stub, a connection, and the connection is physically there. I think that's the reason why DPW said it no longer requires septic, it can be tied in.
And that sewer stub's not part of the other property that, because this was a subdivided property.
Yep.
So it's it was a second sewer stub on that initial?
That's my understanding.
Oh,
Right,
okay,
Chris? Yes.
okay. And the driveway that's being removed, is that other property getting another driveway in the future?
No, you'll recall the original plan called for a driveway to go onto the other property to allow the cars to make that turn. That driveway was never installed because, Chris was not going to move forward with the plan once he found out he didn't have to do the septic. So that other property, the driveway is.
Facing is to the right.
Right, but it's entirely on their property, and we're no longer needing or requiring any kind of easement.
Okay,
So that property's done, sold, there's someone living there, they're very happy. And their driveway was, we never had to build that extension driveway to allow for the easement and the turn. So again, that's what I'm saying, changing this to front facing, you now will have a house with its own driveway and its garage, and then you have ours with our own driveways and our own garages and so
but
on.
that does mean that this is net new impervious.
Actually, we result in a slight reduction in impervious over the originally approved project, because we don't
Or
have
the
to
originally
put,
approved, okay.
we don't have to put all that pavement down the side and on the other lot. So we're actually less pavement here than the originally approved project.
Okay. But over current conditions,
Yeah,
It's a
there's
net-
there's no impervious.
Right.
Yeah.
so wouldn't that require stormwater review?
You want to speak to that, or one of the engineers? While I was going up, quickly, my understanding is that the stormwater regs do not apply to single and two-family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's 4, okay, that's right.
Yeah. I think they've made some provisions, and they had a stormwater memo that
Yeah, I saw that.
DPW reviewed.
Okay,
Yeah. And by the way, we've reviewed the letter from DPW. We've reviewed all of the comment letters. We have no issues whatsoever with what they've recommended, and I do believe in their letter, they comment on the stormwater that we have provided, requiring an O&M, and
Okay.
we're fine with all of that. It's a far less complicated, design now that we've been able to
Keep it simple.
keep it simple and eliminate that septic and eliminate pavement and.
one of the concerns I have, though, is that now that it's a 4-story, with the other properties being so low, I can't tell from these plans, but it doesn't look like there's a lot of screening on the sides for landscaping.
Well, I don't know if
I'll bring
I'd
the
have to go to the site plan
I'll bring the-
to address that.
engineer plan. up.
But, I can appreciate your concern, but the originally approved building was
Lower.
4 stories, no, and higher.
It was 3 stories.
But it
Yeah,
was,
don't
but it
we
was
have a bi-
45 feet.
the peak to 45 feet.
Right.
But windows, 4 stories is definitely higher than 3 stories.
Well, the windows are built into the roof in this situation, you're right.
Right, so it's looking over, and then, I thought we had something on a bylaw that, like, we don't have do we not have like, isn't
You
4
do allow
stories
4 stories in
We-
the COI.
on the COID?
You
In
do,
the underlying zoning district.
Okay.
yeah.
I'm not a fan of this style in this neighborhood. Like, the other style felt more like it fit into the neighborhood. This style, I know I wouldn't be happy if this got built next door to me.
Well, again, originally, we worked with the neighbors.
Right, and that's a different
They supported
style.
it at 45 feet.
But it's a very different looking structure.
I know, but we've also notified our abutters about this response, and Chris has received no comments or concerns, and I will tell you, those neighbors were vocal the original time. They contacted us, they, demanded a meeting, we did all that, and yet there has been no feedback from the neighborhood.
Could we hear from the engineer if they are here? Like, I'm struggling to understand like how the total height could decrease, but did we say the number of stories went up?
Yeah, it went
Yeah.
from 3 to
Yeah.
4.
Yeah, we don't have an architect with us.
Do we have the original? I don't have the original designs? Like the
Yeah, they're
height?
attached to the agenda.
That's what I'm trying to find, but it doesn't say.
When-
I couldn't find the height on the original
No, it
ones.
doesn't say on the original.
Yeah, I couldn't find that.
It says 2.5 stories.
Yeah. So we're going to, yeah. And again, I know that you notified the abutters, but I personally would like to maybe reach out to some of the abutters, because this time of year, I find December, people are really, really busy. And I know a couple other projects that people didn't realize was going on, because with all the holidays between Thanksgiving and,
Well, I mean, we have a process for that, and
yeah, okay.
Oh, for new hearings.
Well, this is a new hearing. We did apply for a new special permit to allow for the parking
Okay.
in the front, so they've been notified.
I would like to see a landscaping plan for this.
Okay. To what end? You'd like to see more buffer between?
Yeah?
Yeah, and I liked, like,
I can't tell if there is buffer. Based on the plans that we have, I can't see the landscaping in there.
do we have,
If you
I've
look
been-
at the new plan,
Mm-hmm.
and you look to the left of the building, you can see that there is up the existing tree line that separates us from the house on the left. And I will remind you that our project meets the side yard setbacks in the COID, which I believe when you're abutting a residential structure are expanded to beyond our usual residential setbacks, so we are providing that. And again, Chris could probably answer this, but Chris, I didn't see where you were proposing to take down that, the buffer between your left-hand neighbor. There's currently no buffer, nor did one ever exist between us and the right side neighbor. In fact, if you'll recall, the original approved plan provided for the driveway to be on their part of the property, and, they granted us an easement to be able to do that. I mean, if you're suggesting or asking whether my client can, provide a screening along the property line to the neighbor of the right, I think we could, Chris, are you comfortable with a fence or arborvitae's or just along that property line to provide some protection between the new structure and the neighbor to the right? I mean, do you recall that there's room there to do it?
I think if you put that in between the houses,
Can you come up to the microphone? I can't hear a thing you're saying.
Come on up, Chris.
Thank you.
Is there, can you see it from the GIS map? Can you bring that up on the, because I
Yep.
could show you what's there now, you know? It's pretty insulated. The whole back, they have these huge, there's these huge pine trees that are about, I don't know, 80 feet tall. They separate us from Duffy's Auto behind us. And then to the left is
Actually, couldn't I have your name and address for the record as well?
Chris Sullivan, 19 Brentwood Road.
Thank you.
Here we are. Here we are. So,
See all that? That's all large, mature trees, and then this whole fence line is pine trees. If we had the house here and put arborvitae's, this house is 35 feet to the peak. Now, how long it would take to grow trees up to block the whole thing, but. So you see all that? And then in the backyard, you can see there's two huge trees here that I'm trying to keep. And then along the whole fence is pine trees.
so it's this boundary that is, currently has no buffer here. And again, once the house is here, you know, if it's a requirement of the board that we put a fence or arborvitae's, again, while Chris may feel would look strange, if the board feels it doesn't,
Yeah, as long as it's,
we'll put a fence and some arborvitae's. But understand, we're technically a 35-foot house or structure next to a 35-foot structure. Or 35 feet high. I do apologize if, you know, aesthetically, you know, the board feels this isn't what they would envision here, but I have to say, we really did our best to try and make this actually fit better in the neighborhood and look like all of the other houses along the street with front-facing garages and parking. I mean, typical residential structure. Again, we can't lose sight of the fact that for better or worse, this site has the ability to be developed in some kind of a commercial use, which
Yeah.
nobody wants. And again, that I think was the big reason the neighbors were so supportive in the past. And I can't see where they would have issues with us reducing the height of the building.
I'm just asking for a landscaping plan because our 195, 116, a whole section of the COA deals with landscaping.
Okay?
And I'm seeing no landscaping plan. I don't even know what trees are being removed as part of this project. So I would like to see a landscaping plan.
Is that something the board would consider conditioning?
Conditioning
An approval of the
landscaping
condition
plan
that we
after
provide?
approval? No, I wouldn't do
Provide-
that. I would want to see a landscaping plan before approval.
And when you say a landscaping plan, I can, you know, propose what you want. Are you saying you want to see a landscaping plan that provides the buffer between those two homes?
I would like to see what trees are being removed. What's the plan for replacing any trees that are removed? Is there a plan for buffer?
So you're saying you want renderings of this?
Yeah, landscaping plan. We've requested it in most of our COA projects, if not all.
This is very different than what was originally proposed. And consider that this is
Very different in what way? You mean
where you, location,
aesthetically?
aesthetically, where you're putting it, the number of floors, where the windows are. I mean,
Okay,
Where-
but then just help me understand how that corresponds to a landscaping plan.
Well, where are the trees? Is
Okay,
it
I-
buffering? Like, can people look in? Like, are you gonna see someone in there, like, this was a very different plan to me.
But it's a 35-foot building, and we're next to a 35-foot building, and this is a residential use and residential activity. I mean, is there ever a requirement to put landscaping or fences or
In the COID, yes, there is.
in the COID? Yes.
And that's where,
When
that's how
9
you've
times out
applied
of
to
10,
this.
that is a commercial use. Listen.
You're
if
coming
you
in
want-
under
if you-
COID.
If you want a landscaping plan, obviously, we have to provide one. I just want to understand, in addition to showing you the trees that we're leaving and the trees we'll be taking down, what is it you'd like to see along that right side? Because quite frankly, I think we can show you that the left side is a very dense buffer, the back is very dense. What we're lacking is landscaping between the two structures. So am I correct in assuming you'd like to see at least our idea or our
Sure.
proposal of what we could put there
Mhm.
to do that?
Yep.
Okay.
And not just in that side, but I want the landscaping plan for the entire property.
Okay, sure,
Yeah.
but I'll be honest with you, in a residential development like this, we're gonna show you the trees that we're gonna keep on the left side, we're gonna show you the trees we're keeping to the back. We're certainly probably not gonna propose putting more trees there, because there's no room to put
Yeah,
them.
that's fine.
But we can
Mhm.
provide some relief on the right-hand side.
How, is this wider than the original plan or more narrow? The new plan?
I'm almost thinking it's a little wider, right? Isn't it a little wider?
But overall, it's a smaller footprint, correct?
Overall, it's small footprint, and although it might be wider, we are still meeting the exaggerated COID side yard setbacks when you're abutting a residential use. I think it expands it to 25 feet, if I recall.
I think
It's
you're
on-
right.
It's on the chart. Yeah, in your commercial district, your side yards are 10 feet, and the COID by right, it says 8 feet, and COID by special permit, 5 feet, but you need to increase it to 25 feet when abutting a residentially used or zoned property. So we've done that. Our proposed setbacks are in fact 25.5 feet on either side. So that does provide us area for some landscaping on the right side. It does.
And sorry if I may, John Riley, Hancock Associates. You're asking for trees to be removed. If you look behind the proposed building on our plan, and there's a few trees that are circled, and one of them has a leader that calls out trees to be removed typical. So I think I'm seeing about 4 around the structure that are to be removed,
One in
and
the-
everything else will remain.
Yeah, one in the dead front of the building, which was always proposed to remain. There's 2 on the left side back, and then as John pointed out, there's 1 in the far back. So it's gonna be easy for us to show you that. We already have it.
Mhm.
But again, I think if we put it on a landscape plan and we color things and, it'll give you a better understanding of that buffer. And again, we will come up with something to propose along the right side. And would likely meet with our neighbor to discuss that.
Yeah, it sounds like it might be.
And if I'm coming back anyways, I will make sure that we have our architect with us so that we can dig into how we got from,
45 to 35.
what
Yeah.
appears to be more stories, but less height,
Yeah.
That'd be great.
okay?
Um,
I'm sorry, I don't quite have that
Right,
understanding, but what has given me comfort here is that we're willing to commit that this building will be, 35 feet plus or minus,
And he's
whatever.
magic.
Yeah.
Chris.
However the architects do that, I know I just reduced the height of a structure on another project, and we did it by looking at the floor to height
Like the
ratios at each
interstitial
at each
space.
thing, and then we flattened out the roof a little, and we were able to gain 8 or 9 feet in reduction. Chris, do you have a?
Quick question. If I got a letter of support from the person I sold the house to, because I used to own the property next to it, to not have any type of buffer. Is that all you're worried about, is just having some sort of?
Yeah, personally, I mean, I
Own
can't
it.
speak to Chris, but it sounds to me like the room is wanting to know more about the neighbors. It sounds like you have good neighbor support.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I could
And,
ask Ruth to give you a letter,
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to me.
rather than the landscaping.
Well, no, I still want to see the landscaping plan, but
If the neighbor says they don't want a buffer.
Well, if they don't need a buffer, they don't have to put trees there, I guess.
yeah, but I still want to see the landscaping plan.
Well,
So we're
proposing,
consistent with all of our other
Yeah.
COID. Just makes it,
Okay.
Okay.
So
Are there any
I'll-
other questions or any other information you'd like me
Joel,
to
do you have
bring
anything?
when I see you next year?
Anita, did you have anything else?
no, I was just,
I just had a question. You're probably going to read the letters in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about departmental letters.
I'll wait till after the letter, because one of them is about the letter
Okay.
from the water district.
So this is from Sheila Joyce, project engineer at DPW. I'm going to paraphrase due to the length of this. Outstanding DPW engineering issues not addressed during construction. Care should be taken to maintain separation of at least 10 feet horizontally from edge of sewer service to the edge of water services. Where horizontal separation at 10 feet is not practical, both services can be installed closer to each other, but the water service must be 18 inches higher than the sewer service per DEP standards. All existing or proposed utilities should be clearly and accurately labeled on the drawing, reflecting most updated utility connections. Finished grades and building elevations should be clearly labeled and reflected on plans. Confirm 1 foot to 20 inches scaling of site plan. Slope stabilization for slopes greater than 3-to-1 ratio is required. Dunstable Road was paved in August 2024, is under moratorium for 5 years. A street opening permit will be required. DPW require curb-to-curb paving, granite restoration, and thermoplastic traffic markings for the frontage of the property. The sidewalk work should be coordinated with DPW. Sewer comments. No increase to the town of Chelmsford sewer infrastructure should be more than 500 GPD. This project proposes two-bedroom duplexes. If there's any change in use or expansion, the applicant should submit necessary floor plans. The sewer impact fee shall be of $6,600 should be paid to DPW prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Depict 2 separate sewer lines on plan set. Only one sewer line is currently shown. Each unit shall have their own sewer line and shall be installed to town standards. Stormwater. Ownership as well as O&M of all stormwater systems and BMPs should be clearly stated on the plans to avoid confusion. The deeds or covenant should clearly specify the homeowner association or property owner who is responsible for owning the system, as well as inspection and maintenance schedules. And then there are general conditions of approval, pretty standard, so I won't go through all those due to the length. Next, fire prevention. Plans to be submitted to fire prevention as part of the building permit process for review. Smoke, carbon monoxide, and heat detectors to comply with the current edition of 780 CMR for locations. Detection type, interconnection, and power supply. Applicant advised to submit floor plans depicting location of detectors to this office for approval. Final inspection required before use. Applicant to apply to the town's E911 committee. This office would approve these plans with these conditions. I ask that you make this letter part of your approval process and public record. Josh Abbott, Captain of Fire Prevention. North Chelmsford Water District. The North Chelmsford Water District would like to note the following regarding the proposed development. The permit site plan proposes to install water service line for both duplexes on the leftmost side facing Dunstable Road of the development. The district does not permit this method of installation because it does not allow access for potential future replacement or repairs of water line service for the rightmost unit. Both lines must be run from the water main to the fronts, not around the sides of the respective units they serve. The water service should be 1-inch diameter copper. Curb stops, boxes must be installed in the sidewalk, be visible and accessible at all times. All fees must be paid to the district prior to turning on water service. Also, please be advised Dunstable Road was recently paved and the water main is across the street. This connection will result in a large surface area requiring pavement. Paul Perez, Superintendent. Treasurer Collector's Office, please contact Tax Collector's Office regarding outstanding FY25 property tax balance. Board of Health, no concerns regarding connection to town sewer. Police Department, no concerns. And Building Department, please be advised that to further review yard requirements and prior to the issuance of a building permit, a certified plot plan by a Massachusetts licensed surveyor needs to be provided to the zoning enforcement officer regarding the subject development for further review. Respectfully, Jose Negron. And that concludes the letters.
You mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that all of those conditions were acceptable, so.
Yeah, especially the water department, what it was, we were proposing the 2 water lines to come down one side. They really want to see one water line, one sewer line, and we can do that.
Okay. So for the next meeting, could you have all the plans updated with all of those
Yes, we
changes
will,
and the
I'll
numbers?
make sure that we have our story matrix and everything's accurate.
Thank you.
I will make sure. And again, we'll bring you further architectural, I'm going to have them update the architectural drawings to show the P-type.
Four stories, yeah.
Yeah, and again, explain how you get to lower, but more stories.
Perfect.
Okay,
All righty?
Thank you.
thanks.
Well, thank you very much.
And then,
for your
John, the
time.
last question, the tax,
Yeah, Chris is going to follow up on that.
okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay,
Any questions?
I will take a motion if no one else has any further questions for the applicant.
Make a motion to continue
continue.
to January 8th. Thank you.
A second.
Motion by Anita, second by Chris, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay.
Well, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful holiday. We'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, next up, we have 4 Palet Drive, which is requesting a continuation without discussion.
I move that we continue for Palet Drive hearing to January 8th
My second?
without,
Okay, motion by Chris, second by Anita, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next up, we have 10 Independence, wait, am I in the wrong place? I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place.
it's up for hearing.
Liaisons and
That's it. So now, wait, now we have the new business or liaison updates.
Yep.
Do we have any?
I have update from the Concom meeting. Concom had 2 meetings since we last met. The first meeting on the 26th, Palet was continued and then continued again last night without any hearing. 10 Hildreth on the November 26th meeting. Natural Heritage did issue their report, but one of the things that the Concom noted was that there was no mention of the vernal pools in the report. So David was going to contact Natural Heritage to find out if they know about the vernal pools or not, or if they chose to ignore them. And I believe they're still waiting for information, so it was continued again last night. So they're awaiting more information. So, and that was pretty much it.
And then
So their next meeting is January 14th, so it'll be after our next one.
John and I attended a ad hoc meeting about Palet with members of the DPW, members of the neighborhood, several neighbors from Dunshire Drive, the owner, Casey was there, Concom had a couple members there, and kind of one of the points of the meeting was to get a better understanding by, at least we had the question, and so did the Concom members, of why are we here? Why are we being forced to make this parking lot right now. And do you want to?
Yeah, it was helpful to have the fire chief there, and as you
Oh,
said,
right,
in conservation, so the fire chief explained the background, that there were at least 2 occasions in the past where they had difficulty accessing the site, cars were legally parked, and that was the impetus for DPW making these requests. So I thought it was a very productive meeting.
Yeah.
I was,
So we kind of tossed different things around, but at the end of the meeting, one of the things that came about was everyone had an interest in having the parking lot behind the building be smaller than previously proposed, and the DPW clarified that they would be willing to let cars be parallel parked on the cul-de-sac, but not in the cul-de-sac, so that a preliminary concept of a smaller parking lot was produced by and distributed by Casey that was 8 or maybe 9 or 10 spots, depending, behind the building. So they would take up less of the green space. They would retain some green space, maybe some land banked spaces, because there's still a remaining problem of when there's snow ban emergencies, then there's not going to be still enough spots, because those spots will have to leave the cul-de-sac. And the owner has no interest in making a private party arrangement with a neighbor or someone else. So they're still kind of working out the details, but it sounds like we took some decent steps forward towards satisfying everyone understanding why we're trying to do this, and is there space for compromise? And it seemed that there was.
and the fire chief was amenable, it seemed in the meeting, to having striping there would be certain areas on the cul-de-sac that would be striped and say no parking at any time or something to that effect. So that would take care of the public safety aspect. So it seemed good.
Where the swept plan is, so that no one would park where the fire department has to be, but then they could park in the other places, theoretically. Okay.
And just, I don't want to interrupt when you're done. I just have one thing on ZBA. Yep. So the Zoning Board of Appeals met on December 5th. I was not able to attend in person, but watched the video recording of the meeting. The main subject that took up significant time in the meeting, an abutter brought an appeal, wanted to appeal the planning board decision on 150 North Road before the board, and ultimately, after a lot of discussion, hearing all of the testimony, and the ZBA voted to deny the appeal by a unanimous vote. So, just to give everyone an update on 150 North Road.
Just what were they appealing?
It seemed to be the decision, and I think
Was there
town
some
council-
determination by the zoning officer?
Yeah, they upheld that the zoning, the building commissioner, had cause to issue the permit, and all that, did not err. Evan may be able to.
So council indicated to the board in the appellant that the only reason that the appeal was valid was that by the time the hearing was open, the building commissioner issued a foundation permit. And council explained that for a by right site plan, in order to be appealed, a building permit must be issued. So prior to that issuance of the building permit, there was some discussion and difficulty in validating if in fact it was a valid appeal. But by the time the hearing opened, he did have a valid appeal because a building permit was issued. And the issuance of a building permit alone is appealable.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to figure out what was
Yeah,
it that
that
was being
question was
appealed?
asked.
I mean, normally the appeal is because of an action taken by the zoning officer.
Correct. This
You
was
know,
a very
that you
unusual
disagree
appeal.
with, and that.
That was all acknowledged, and that it may not have been the proper forum.
Okay.
You wouldn't like to have this start a circular appealing process.
This is like, what, anyway. So if that's it for John,
All
then
set, thank
Board of Health met on the 3rd, and there was, they're actually now adding, like the Concom, they're adding a planning board report to their public input section. So I got there a little bit late, so they were very gracious and reopened their public input so that I could provide them sort of our status, and then we had some discussion. And Richard Day asked an interesting question, and that was, what percentage of what size lots are in Zone 2 with regards to the ADUs and the question of septic? And so I thought that was an interesting question, too.
Can you
I
repeat
think,
that question again?
yeah, what's the percentage of different size lots that are in Zone 2? So basically just trying to get a sense of, what's the possible, what possible development might there occur, particularly in Zone 2. And so I thought that was an interesting question, because obviously they're concerned, as we would be concerned under an aquifer protection district, for what the, what the impacts could be in Zone 2 with septic, so.
So are they going to propose to answer that question, or are they looking to us to
No,
answer that question?
yeah,
or what?
I said that was an
Just
interesting
esoteric.
question, and I said I would pose it
When we get into
to
the
the board.
ADU discussion.
That's what I figured.
It likely won't be irrelevant at all.
Okay, so, so in any case, so their next meeting is January 7th.
Good, thank you.
John, so I don't have a NEMCOG update, but we did have a tri-board meeting on Monday, and I think it might be relevant. Sorry, that's my fault. Might be relevant to maybe kind of give the board, if you haven't watched, did you guys watch the tri-board meeting?
I did not yet.
Okay, so as Paul Cohen has been saying for the last 3-4 years, with the increase in inflation and our limit with the 2.5 increase on property taxes, at some point, those things do not meet.
Our ability to sustain a level service
Service
budget
budget
will
do not
be
meet, yep.
impeded.
So when they did the initial roll-up, and I probably should defer this to John, who's the treasurer, who can probably talk about it more, but, so John, if you want to.
If you'd like me to it.
Yeah,
So
you're the expert.
You can go, anyone's welcome to go read back and they review it, and you can see Paul's presentation. I provided an update on capital. Darlene gave an update on where we are year-to-date in the current fiscal year. But just to give you a quick summary, unfortunately, we're facing one of the most difficult years coming in fiscal year 26 for our operating budget because of the reasons you described. 76% of the town's operating budget, or 77, is funded through property taxes, and it's limited by Prop 2.5. And so, to summarize, we're facing right now about a $2.5 million budgetary deficit. And so there was a lot of discussion back and forth with the school committee, school administration. It's going to be difficult to sustain level services, so that's going to mean some type of reduction in services to be able to get to the 2.5. It's just, we haven't seen a difficult year like this in quite a while, probably since the last recession of 2009, 2010.
And the difference between like the last recession and where we are today is the last recession, what Paul brought up, and, we shouldn't forget, is that, when we were facing collective bargaining agreements, people didn't take a raise. They got 0. Mm-hmm. Now we're in a very unique situation, right? Unemployment's very low.
And inflation.
Really high. So, we don't compensate people. People will leave and go to another town. And I think Paul gave an example of a police officer that went to Westford, right? And we had trained them. They had gone through the training, and I forget how the dollar amount, but was significantly more than what we're paying here in Chelmsford. So,
And somebody went to state last couple of years ago too.
It's not like we can go to, the police, the fire, the teachers, and say, hey, it's not like 08 where everybody kind of was like, in industry, people weren't getting raises, it was appropriate. This is a different dynamic. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important that we kind of have that in mind when we kind of talk about some of the other things on our agenda tonight. So I think I just wanted to bring that up to everybody's attention.
Thank you. All right, is that all for liaisons?
Yeah, nothing here, but we do have a master plan committee coming up next month.
Okay.
So I'll be reporting on that when it happens.
So on to new business. First up is the Center Village Master Plan Committee, we have a voting spot on that committee, and that was a spot that Paul held, so we need to appoint someone else to that committee. I am going to exempt myself from that because I am in a butter to that district, so I can't vote on most of the things that they take up. So I don't think it makes much sense, though I have an interest in the things that they take up. I can't opine on them, so.
What days and times do they meet, do you know?
They usually meet the first Thursday of the month,
At night?
6 PM usually.
Well, I can certainly do it, at least in the interim, until we get our boards sorted out come next election.
Yeah, I mean, I think they really do need somebody there.
Yeah, they do. We need to keep an eye on them.
I mean, I can, I can do it for the, I'll be willing to do it. How many times a month do they meet?
Once a month.
All right.
It's not
I
a
mean,
big deal.
Then we can kind of figure out at the election.
Yeah, okay. All right, next up, we have town council.
Just let me know when the next meeting is.
You want to do a motion to appoint on that?
Oh, yeah, I'll take a motion.
Move it?
Move to appoint Anita.
Yeah.
We'll take a second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next up, we have town council's review of the Attorney General's MBTA zoning approval letter. I don't know if everyone had a chance to read the Thursday, December 5th memo from council. It looked like there's a couple things that we do need to, that should be addressed, but they seem more mostly terminology.
I saw only two definites. One is the striking the need for additional school facilities as a
Right.
criteria, and then the other one was the family definition.
Right. And the impact on town services more generally.
But I think he said that one shouldn't need to be changed. It's on a case-by-case basis,
Okay.
except for the school services.
Okay.
I mean, my impression was that at least I wanted to look at it a little bit more closely to make sure that the right verbiage is in the right place, so that if there is some restriction on how you interpret the criteria, that's co-located with the criteria, so that you have a sense of how am I limited when I read these, right? Because we're not the only ones that read them; the residents will read them as well, which is great. But that way, it can be confusing for somebody who's not as familiar with reading through the bylaws and stuff to recognize there's different pieces in different places.
Right.
So that was one thing I wanted to look at to see, is that a case here where we should, possibly modify some of the wording so that it's co-located with where it's relevant.
So I guess procedurally, I mean, he's making recommendations to us, but I don't know that we're gonna be the ones proposing the amendment. Am I correct that?
You absolutely will be the ones
Okay.
proposing.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
We have to
I was gonna
propose at
say.
town meeting?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
that was my question.
No, but I mean, can we get assistance from council
Oh, of course. Yeah.
in actually
Yeah, I mean, these are,
composing the
yeah,
amendment?
I mean, these are really housekeeping items.
Right,
Yeah.
The definition of family, outside of MBTA zoning, could quickly run into fair housing law violations, depending on how it's. And then the one directly related to MBTA zoning is, specifically related to school facilities. It's kind of ministerial housekeeping
Right.
items.
Is that spring, also spring?
At the latest, it would be spring.
Okay.
It could be wrapped into a special, depending on where we go with ADUs, but at the latest, it would be spring.
So we'd have three things then, because we have the floodplain, the ADU, and the MBTA amendment.
Yeah,
But the ADU needs to be done before spring.
We're gonna discuss that.
Yeah.
We're gonna discuss that next.
timeline,
Yep.
yeah.
The fourth item, potentially, the board may want to advance the Kate's Corner rezoning.
Are we really going to have time to do that with everything else?
Well, I mentioned that because that is on for the January 8th meeting. I was just about to send the abutter notification. So as of right now, 65 Dunstable, 4 Paylet are regulatory items. I'm not aware of any new hearings. So if you want to continue with Kate's Corner, I will send that abutter notice out.
I think
Yeah.
I mean, we
it's
can
fine.
try.
We can try. At least,
Do it.
at least we start the conversation with them.
Yeah,
And if we can't put it for spring, then we can
then we have the ball rolling a little
get the ball
bit.
rolling, at least.
Yeah.
All right, I'll send it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you want, I can take a stab at the actual changes for these bylaw changes, the edits.
The
Have a
administerial.
draft for the 8th?
Yeah.
The
do that.
MBTA, yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah,
But I have a
the
question.
MBTA district compliance application will be going in between now and the end of the calendar year. I'm working on that this week, next week.
What's the progress on the agreement changes?
So the choice agreement, revised development agreement is signed and executed. The revised development agreement for Trammell Crow, they've indicated via email that there's no outstanding issues. We just need to provide them a final clean copy for their review and signature. So that seems to be progressing.
Question, now that the choice agreement is signed in process, do those units start to count?
No, nowhere close. Those units will count once financing is
Okay.
obtained
All right,
and they pull a building permit.
okay. I knew there was a permitting issue, but,
When do we think that'll happen?
David has indicated that he has submitted for the most recent round of funding, and he expects to hear a decision, I think, in the springtime. But construction wouldn't start till probably spring, summer, fall.
okay. All right, update from the select board meeting regarding retail cannabis. I don't know
You
that,
did receive an email, but I provided a hard copy in your
Oh.
packet. I think the takeaway is there may not be a lot for you to discuss tonight,
right. I mean,
unless you have a strong feeling about where the select board is.
So,
they're proceeding with putting it back to the voters, which seems like a reasonable first step to me. And I would say before we do anything further, we should wait and see
what those results are.
what the voters say. And does anyone have a different thought?
Nope.
So,
Do we know what our discussion is with the select board on the 23rd?
I'm sorry?
We're discussing that on the 23rd, right?
Well,
Hoping we
Select
don't
board.
anyway.
I don't
May
think
not
we're
be a
not
need
going
to.
to
Okay,
anymore.
okay, that was the
Yeah,
question.
that got
Okay.
kiboshed because of their decision to put it on the ballot, which seems quite sensible to me.
I,
Were you going to say something?
I was, but I'll just not say anything.
Okay. Next up, we have the ADUs. So I don't know if everyone had a chance to read through. We had a fair bit of correspondence, which is mostly revisions and revisions. Of our current policy and also the legal feedback from council about the guidelines. So I guess the first thing we need to decide is what is our timeline and kind of procedural approach to this. It seems that we're moving down the path of writing some our own new zoning policy to be in compliant prior to February, 2nd?
Correct. Council sent an email at my request. You have a hard copy of it. I don't think I forwarded it to you. So as a starting point, I think part of tonight's discussion, before we adjourn, the board really needs to figure out if you want to advance this to a special town meeting. If you do, the select board would sign the warrant on January 6th, which means that the final language would need to be provided to the select board for their packet on January 2nd, which means we may need a special meeting between now and then. Town meeting could take place any day during the week of the 27th. Normally, it's on a Monday, but if planning board members are not available, town manager said any day during the week would be adequate for the statutory timelines. Council's email, I posed a question of if we do nothing and February 2nd comes and we start getting applications, how do we handle it? And then in his last sentence, he appears to be recommending that the board take the opportunity to put regulations in place now that will specifically apply to ADUs allowed by right under the new state act. I think the reason my conversations over the last couple of days with council, and I think other councils are making the same recommendation, is that with local regulation in place, it provides some level of predictability for applicants, meaning residents, and probably more importantly for the building commissioner.
Yeah.
While those regulations may need to be changed, council still appears to say some level of predictability is better than no level.
That makes sense.
And are these the ones that track changes or the changes to the zoning bylaw that he's recommending?
Yeah, so what you have in hard copy and what's up on the screen is the most recent. From your last meeting, when I was tasked with
Yep.
amending the LAA bylaw, council's seeing, this is the third iteration.
Right.
This iteration reflects council's review of the draft state guidelines.
The draft guidelines, okay.
Yes.
Because those draft guidelines are the ones that are open for public input sometime later this month. And then I guess that's another question, but I guess we should focus on this question first. But, I mean, it's kind of maybe a yes, no answer. Does anybody want to submit anything in the open request for feedback to the state? My first thought would be no, because they don't seem that responsive.
Yeah. Sad.
So there will be, I know NIMCOG has reached out to all their member communities, attempting to have a coordinated conversation, it's primarily among staff, obviously, to see if there's any common themes to submit comments on. Certainly boards can piggyback on that effort, or you can, do what you did, I think with the select board on a prior, trying to remember what it was. I think it was ADUs initially.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is, we could send out some iteration of that letter and any changes that we have from then to now,
Yep.
and take the opportunity to say, we have issues with this, and just, it's more of a
Yeah.
declaration than feedback, but,
Yeah, I wouldn't spend a lot of time tonight trying to express dissatisfaction or displeasure.
right,
I think our focus needs to be on understanding
the nuts and bolts.
what we think the requirements are at this point based upon council's review. I've attended several webinars. And then focus on deciding whether you want to pursue special town meeting and then quickly, finalizing the language.
Did I see somewhere that you had pointed us to where we can also see those webinars?
They have not published the recordings or the slide deck yet.
Okay. Will you let us know it?
I will, yeah.
If and when they do?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, do we want to read through this, kind of like we did with the NEMCOG MBTA draft, or does anyone have a different idea of how we should proceed?
Well, I just wanted to ask a couple of topical questions
Okay.
first, and that is, what about the question of septic versus sewer?
Yep, so, the way I think this law and the regulations have been interpreted to date, while the regulations don't provide any specificity on utility regulations. The theme is pretty clear that you cannot treat ADUs any more restrictively than you do single families. So it's not an issue that needs to be or ought to be included as part of a zoning bylaw, which then takes it completely outside of Dover, and then you'd be relying entirely on the DPW sewer restriction regulation.
Yeah.
That currently is drafted where any accessory detached structure on a residential lot, such as a pool cabana or a detached garage, does not allow for its own dedicated line. The uniqueness with this is that currently the town doesn't allow detached ADUs or accessory dwelling units, therefore the DPW sewer regulation didn't need to contemplate it. But I think the notion of the DPW regulation being revised to specifically prohibit a connection, which then forces Title V, if that were to be challenged, I'm not sure it'd be considered, reasonable, not within zoning, but simply because the town would be treating an accessory dwelling unit differently than any other.
Right.
But
I don't know if they tied in, I mean, they say, for example, the walks, there isn't to be a separate walk.
Yeah, I mean, I
to
put that
the-
in. I put
separate
that in because
driveway.
that's a common provision from fire prevention for ADUs. Again, I think as of right now, utilities, it's not specified in the regulation. The state's asked for additional comment and perspective from communities. But I think my message to you is the zoning bylaw in and of itself does not need to speak to everything. For
Right,
example, it
yeah.
doesn't even need to mention like wetlands jurisdiction.
Right, no, and I see that, I definitely,
Yep.
and I agree with that. I was more thinking, what's gonna be if we can we anticipate, like, I don't wanna kick something into somebody else's hands that they're not prepared or ready to deal with it. But I guess water and sewer both have to make their decisions about how they whether they wanna have separate,
Right,
same, or what.
right.
But
I think introducing a prohibition into zoning that's a clear red flag.
Right, right. So DPW then or the town needs to think about
Correct.
sewer constraints and because right now, right, at least the last thing I remember, residential was limited, or you couldn't have new residential connections to sewer.
You can, but the regulation also says you cannot increase beyond 500 gallons.
Right.
So an ADU is not more than 500 gallons.
Right.
So it's, the restriction currently would allow the ADU. The question is, can it be connected to the existing main that serves the house?
Right.
Or can a second main be required?
And that's really somebody
That's-
else's regulations.
Yeah,
Right.
and if it's not a capacity issue, which it doesn't appear to be, then that really comes down to a best design practices for sanitary, plumbing, and,
Right, okay,
and sewer design.
okay.
But DPW is aware that they need to review that section of their regulation.
Okay. Yeah. That was really one of the questions I had.
So I understand on the sewer. So currently, like, if I wanted to add an addition, like, I wanted to double the size of my house, I'm adding double bedrooms, someone in a single family can do that, right, with the sewer, right, that's normal. But if I want to take my lot and build two houses, I only have one connection, so the other one I would have to put septic.
Currently, you can't do that in Chelmsford. There's one house per lot.
Well, just say I have like a double lot.
Okay.
Okay, right? And so I have a double lot. I want to put two houses, one on each lot, right, and passes everything. Because I don't have a connection on one, I would have
So
to.
similar to 65 Dunstable.
Right.
If you have two legally separate lots.
Yep.
Each lot is required to have its own sewer and water.
And sewer and
connections.
water.
Yeah.
And if I only had one connected to the sewer, I would theoretically put a septic on the other one, because I didn't have a connection set up, because that would be in addition, right, under our current
Correct.
restraints.
Correct. So
Okay.
the difference here is that the lot already has a sewer connection.
Yep.
And now the state law is changing to allow an ADU.
But in a multifamily lot, you would have two separate water mains and one sewer.
So on like a subdivision like Jackson Road,
Or any duplex multifamily.
yeah, so 65 Dunstable is going to have two sewer mains and two water mains, connections, not mains, water lines.
Right, so
Correct.
but that wouldn't be,
This is what DPW is struggling with, but it's
but I would
not-
assume it'd be the same for an
DPW
ADU
struggle.
because they're two separate units.
You could easily come to that conclusion, but it's not, my point is, it's not a capacity
So
issue,
it's not the, it's not.
and it's
no.
certainly not a zoning issue.
It's all right,
Yeah.
it's not our
So
jurisdiction.
DPW.
No.
Right,
Yeah,
right. So from a best design principle for designing and operating a wastewater system, the likely best option is two lines. It may, for all I know, and we know, maybe the plumbing code and the sanitary code requires that. So there needs to be some internal discussions with the plumbing inspectors, the water inspectors, DPW, to figure it out.
Right.
And it's not a capacity issue.
I don't view it as a capacity issue only in the sense that prior to ADUs ever coming on the scene, the current regulation contemplated allowing existing single-family homes to put on more bedrooms and more bathrooms.
Got it. That's what I was kind of getting at, like, if I wanted to
Right.
do an addition, I
Right.
could add more
You-
bedrooms and
right.
bathrooms.
So in one
It's
way
not-
to say, well, how is that any different
And
than
then-
adding
okay.
a two-bedroom ADU
Right,
that's detached? Capacity-wise, flow-wise, I don't think it is a difference. It's more of a physical difference and an operational difference. However, the town could easily say, well, that regulation was written at the time when, detached ADUs weren't allowed, it was never
Right.
contemplated.
okay, so would that be a reasonable, I guess, would that be considered a reasonable,
So the reasonableness is only within zoning.
okay,
That's why you see the state regs say, anything outside of zoning still applies. Wetlands,
okay,
Title V if it's required, Board of Health regulations.
okay.
But,
Understood.
but I think the town will need to be prepared to answer those kinds of questions at a special meeting.
No question about it, yep. Yep. So my suggestion is maybe we just go over the
Yeah.
draft,
Yeah.
maybe go through it section by section, but
Yeah.
at a minimum, capture the highlights. Because as I mentioned, if you're pursuing a special town meeting, we're likely going to have to schedule a special meeting of the planning board between now and Wednesday the 1st, Thursday the 2nd. So the first section is the definition. Council indicated, pull it directly from the guidelines. That's what the blue is.
I would like to, in the definition, add specific language about principal single-family dwelling.
We'll get to that, but I understand what you're saying, because that's a comment further
Yeah.
on.
But I think I would like to add it into the
Yep,
definition. There are two places where we talk about the dwelling. There's the same lot as principal single-family dwelling, and then when it talks about the detached
Extra detached from the principal dwelling.
from the single-family principal dwelling. In that definition.
Yep. So in, in this comment here, this is from today, last night. I can't figure out council initially, here it is. Initially, in the second version, I had what your text in there, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And then council indicates, but after having read the proposed regs now several times, I'm inclined to think that HLC intends to take the position that a town cannot prohibit an ADU for a multifamily residential unit or a two-family unit, where that ADU will be the first ADU meeting the state definition of a lot. If the town does want to attempt to restrict ADUs to single-family dwellings, we will have to consider what the bylaw would look like, and if it is part of, and if that part is to be removed. So that's one of many very specific provisions in the draft guidelines that is not crystal clear.
So are you saying that we could entertain putting only one single ADU on a multifamily or a two-family, or then would we be able to?
Anything
have
more than one requires a special permit.
Yeah.
The question, and Chris picked up on this, I think the first time we discussed this, was that I think everyone, when this was being rolled out, I think everyone assumed, just based upon the tenor of the discussion, that it was going to be for single families that are allowed within residential zoning districts. The draft regulations appear to have expanded it to single, two, threes, and multi.
Anywhere where there's a single family allowed.
Correct.
So any zone.
Like an RC.
In
Chelmsford would be an RC.
Correct, but.
Yeah, any residential zone.
But that an ADU would be allowed on an existing two-family, an existing triplex, or a multifamily. So council, I think, is kind of waiting for some additional clarity on that. He's also indicating that between now and the regulations being finalized, if we choose to move forward, the town could take a reasonable interpretation and apply reasonable regulation to restrict it to single family. But he's not suggesting that that's going to be the way this unfolds when the
Right.
final
We
regulations are
could
issued.
get overridden.
Right.
So, Evan, when you do provide input, I think this is an area where we have to have more clarity. Because if it's allowed on multifamilies, that's going to incentivize the immediate building or seeking approval of an ADU so that whoever gets there first gets it by right. The second one will have to go through a special permit. So if I'm in a duplex, I'm going to race my neighbor to propose an ADU so that I can get it by right, and he would have to go through a special permit.
Isn't
if you're-
this gonna
if you're
depend
on
on
a-
the ownership of the land?
I mean, this kind of gets back to the whole MBTA discussion. If you're on a duplex, presumably it's a condo, like 65 Dunstable, it'd have to be a condo, unless it's a rental, unless the property owner keeps it as a rental property. But as soon as it's a condo, undoing those condo ducts, similar to MBTA, condo associations, may be pretty difficult, if not impossible. But if an investor now knows that the ADU law
Yeah.
exists, and they build a two-family and keep it as a rental, or convert it back out of a condo, if that's possible. Yeah, but I don't see the race. Once it's a condo, I don't see the race.
But it's even, we've got the issue with the RC zone where we actually incentivize, taking our single-family homes, putting a two-family home. And now, again, that's driving part of the problem why
Yeah.
the prices are going so high, is because the developers have deep pockets and they can outbid anybody who's trying to buy
Yeah,
their
I mean, I
first-time
don't-
home. And so
I
unless
think
we
those are all good comments for the state, but for the here and now,
I get that,
Yeah, I mean, for us to-
but I guess my comment on this is that at this point, I like to restrict it to single-family and
Yep.
not to multifamily, because unless we fix our RC zoning where we de-incentivize the conversion of single-family homes into two-family homes, we're just adding to the problem here,
Yeah.
because they are, developers are just gonna outbid.
Yeah, I think we should put in the restriction now, and then if the state comes down with guidelines that we can't do that, then
Contradict that.
we
Yep.
look at removing
So
it.
that would
Yeah.
then be RA and RB, but not RC and not RM?
No, it would have to be to single-family dwellings. We'd have to restrict it to single-family
Single-family dwellings,
dwellings,
so-
not to the zone.
Not to the
Okay,
zone.
okay,
yeah.
so you're talking about dwellings themselves?
Yeah.
Okay,
And then he references that the use table
all right.
needs to be revised accordingly. I think currently ADUs, I don't believe is listed in the use table.
No.
The minor housekeeping item. The next
Actually,
major-
Evan, on that,
What's that?
we would have to put in 2 new lines, right? So the first ADU would be by right, second, or,
I don't know if you need to on the second one, because that's statutory. I don't
Okay.
think there's any harm if we do.
might make things more clear, because if
Yeah,
someone
it's
already
belt and
has an ADU.
suspenders, but I'm not sure it's a requirement.
Okay.
And the definition of, your question is, should we not also add a definition for a principal dwelling?
No,
And you're thinking
define
is
it.
Second one.
principal-
No, on the zoning table, I was initially thinking of a line for ADUs, and then note that it's by
Second, more
right,
than one, right.
by right in the zone.
No, I mean, originally, your original comment
Oh, the original comment.
was about, in the definitions, there's the definition for the ADU, but there's not a definition for the
Principal dwelling.
principal dwelling. unit.
Statute, the
I was-
regulations
Principal
define
single
principal.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just gonna
Okay.
clarify, instead of principal dwelling, principal single-family dwelling.
Okay, okay.
That would be my
Right.
edit.
Right.
And so that's what you're suggesting? Okay.
To the extent we can, restrict it to
Okay.
single family.
Does the way it is defined now, is it existing or can it be proposed?
It can be proposed.
So somebody could come in with a proposal to build a single family
Mhm.
and an ADU at the same time? Okay.
So the next major area is C3. And if you recall, at the last meeting, I had talked about the existing zoning sections, dimensional sections that would likely be, that are currently applicable and would likely be applicable. So council has provided some very specific language here. And he's saying, for purposes, this is specific to pre-existing non-conforming. For purposes of applying such requirements to ADUs shall be considered part of the principal dwelling to which they are accessory and not as a separate accessory building or structure. Where the principal dwelling is non-conforming, either lot, undersized lot, or the structure itself doesn't comply with setbacks, FAR, or lot coverage, the ADU shall, in addition, meet the requirements of 195-8E, which is specific to single and two-family pre-existing non-conforming, provided that when a determination is required that the ADU will not be substantially more detrimental than the existing non-conforming structure of the neighborhood, which is what the building commissioner does now. So what he's doing is he's essentially, and then you see he struck the remainder of the sentence. He's indicating that by treating an ADU, whether it's attached or detached, and specifically as part of the principal structure, you no longer need to apply 195-9 and 195-11. That simplifies things from a regulatory perspective. But I think what council is attempting to do here is streamline the reasonableness legal determinations. What I will say is, if this passes as drafted, that provision where the detached ADU in particular would be considered part of the principal structure, it would only be applied to ADUs. That is not how we apply it
Right.
to other detached structures. So again, I think that's within the spirit of trying to take what very likely could be considered unreasonable regulation, meaning the way we currently treat a detached garage, which requires to be compliant with regular setbacks, and trying to apply that to a Dover protected ADU. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think it's much different than the way we envision handling that.
So just from a practical perspective, using the setback example, the setbacks that we normally would apply to single-family homes would then apply to the detached ADU. So if it's a specific setback for the single family, that would also be applied to the additional detached ADU.
Only where the existing lot complies with lot size and the existing structure fully complied with setbacks. So again, those are your South Chelmsford neighborhoods, 40,000 square foot lots.
Right, so most of the town doesn't comply.
Correct.
So,
So most of the town is gonna fall under this provision here. You're an undersized lot,
yeah,
you're automatically in 195 AE, which you currently are. The difference is that if someone came to the building department today and had an undersized lot, the new detached structure would not be afforded any protections. It would be required to comply with current dimensional
Okay.
standards.
so now,
What council's suggesting is, again, because the ADU is a Dover protected use, you have to be reasonable, and the reasonable standard is you can't treat it any more restrictively than a single-family home. He's making the connection that the way to simplify that, or to make it work from a legal reasonableness perspective, is that a detached ADU or an attached ADU that provides an extension beyond, the plane, so to speak, would be based upon a theory or notion that it was part of the principal structure. So it's making it more workable.
but wait a minute, why would a detached be considered part of the principal structure? Like, so currently, like, you're in, you want to add an addition to your house, right? But you're in a undersized lot. It wouldn't be granted.
Those have,
Say-
so those rely on the historical setbacks, which are reduced from current
Right.
setbacks. And the bylaw allows for, let's assume you had an L-shaped
Yeah.
house, and you wanted to fill the L, you wanted to square your house off. You're allowed to do that by right, because your new addition is not projecting beyond the existing plane of the perimeter of the house.
Okay,
So we allow that. We allow that for all scenarios. So he wanted to capture that, and then my conversation with him, we were struggling with detached, particularly if you apply 195.11. And 195.11, as I said, it's a current regulation which speaks specifically to detached accessory structures. And it does not afford any historical protections because it's considered a new structure. So we require variances. And under the new law, you can't require special permits or variances. So he's trying to figure out a legal mechanism that doesn't have a red flag when the AG or is approved, and then we're actually working with the bylaw. And the building commissioner or the zoning board is then in a predicament where their bylaw doesn't provide a clear path of reasonableness.
So is what he proposing, just so I understand, is not to go through the variance mechanism, it's just you would apply, I guess my
Yep,
concern is that if you're in an, your current lot doesn't comply, and you want to put, you're in say, a small lot, right? And you have to have so many feet setback, right? And you want to add an accessory dwelling.
It's gonna be handled the same procedure is gonna be handled the same way we do it now. Either you can do it by right, if you
Right.
meet very specific.
Specific.
Where you don't meet it by right, you're kicked into 195(8), which automatically goes to the zoning board. It goes to the zoning board for a special permit.
Yeah, but you said you can't.
What he's saying is, administratively, it's gonna be a finding. That's not in the bylaw, but he explained to me that's kind of like an administrative detail as to how the zoning board would handle it.
So it would still go
It
to
would-
the zoning board, but it's not like it's not a special
Correct.
okay, oh, okay.
It's a finding, which is
It's which is different than a
lowest
variance
threshold.
Okay.
and permit, okay,
And that's the majority vote that he
Correct,
mentions.
the simple majority
Okay.
vote is the finding, right,
okay.
But it would still go to that board.
yes.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
that's
what I
what I
was
just
trying
wanted to understand, okay.
Now, just to extend the conversation, because we now know how Dover uses work, it goes to the board, but,
Not
as
much
he
they can do.
explained, and he has explained, council explained to the zoning board, explained to the planning board, because it's a protected Dover use, you have to have a really, really, really good reason for denial.
But it just but if you have but if it doesn't hit the setback, is that,
More of a guideline, and it's gonna be handled on a case-by-case basis. So let's assume they assume they apply to the zoning board for a finding.
yeah,
In the finding requires, let's say, a 20-foot setback. And they come in at 5, 7, 10. The zoning board does not have the legal ability to outright deny it simply because you don't comply. They're going to have to go on a case-by-case basis, and more often than not, they're likely gonna be required to approve. This is the strategy of the law. It created a Dover use. If it were not a Dover use, then you'd still be able to apply a special permit, there would be discretion. So the state clearly knew what they were doing from the start, tying it to what they believe is a housing crisis. They likely learned lessons from MBTA zoning, and they figured out a way to prioritize and emphasize more predictability on their end and less discretion on the local level.
But they specifically say that it's not to be treated any differently than you would treat a single family.
Right.
Yet, we don't allow single families to expand.
So what
To that
council said,
extent.
and maybe at our special meeting, we'll have council there.
I
I
was
think
gonna say,
it'd be
we
a good
need to have
idea.
council there, yeah.
I've asked these questions. He said, even if you want to pursue a bylaw that did treat it exactly the same, it still doesn't solve the problem. What it does is it creates a problem for your zoning board every time attorneys are working with single-family homeowners applying. And the attorney's going to show up and say, this is a protected Dover use, your setback requires 20 feet, I'm at 10. I think your 20 is unreasonable. So what council, I think, is trying to do is thread that needle.
I think
Knowing that if you don't have reasonable regulation, the attorneys show up and basically say your regulations aren't reasonable. Not unreasonable for everybody, unreasonable for my client on this lot based upon what they want to propose. And remember, the ADUs for a detached can average from 500 to 900. Right, the largest is 900.
Yeah, but this is new, and this is one of those things that I think needs to kind of be vetted out, because I think when you start having a lot of cases start going to land
Yeah,
court
yeah.
because people are denying.
There's going to be a lot of litigation, no
Right,
question about
right,
it.
right. And this is one of those things that I don't think we need to be on the front line of being aggressive on this, especially on undersized lots in this town. And I
We
think
don't?
we shouldn't be we shouldn't be in the forefront of like going, okay, let's,
You mean
Just-
aggressive in allowing?
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we need.
Aggressive in not allowing is what we should be doing.
I
Okay,
understand,
whatever, yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Because, let me tell you, like, all of a sudden now I'm having everybody come tell me, oh, guess what, my town just voted on the MBTA committee, and they're all upset, and I'm like, yeah, you kind of have to comply by the end of the year. And, I think this is gonna play out just like that, and I think there's gonna be a lot of, additional grumbling.
Yeah, not disagreeing with you, but I think
and-
what council's suggesting is, be laser focused on trying to come up with the best solution based upon a not-so-great situation.
Yeah, I also don't wanna make it, floodgates that people all of a sudden an undersized lot, we make it into a city, because
That's,
if it's not conforming.
I wish council would hear, if the.
Well, let's have him here next time.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if the board
we can.
chooses not to proceed with a special town meeting, come February 2nd, applications will be filed.
I'm not saying not.
And the building commissioner is likely going to rely on guidance from council. I think we know what council's guidance is gonna
Yeah.
be. So I think what council's message is you're better served trying to get a front of it to the best of your ability to provide predictable guidance.
Right, I
but-
mean,
but
he's
the-
gonna defer to Dover,
Yeah,
and he's gonna defer to the intent of the law,
As we understand it now.
as we understand it
Right,
now.
but the outcome, as Anita is articulating, it's pretty predictable at this point. If you're a community that has certain challenges, yeah, this is likely not the strategy that many towns would have taken.
right. I guess I'd like to, have him here and go through this
Yeah,
with him
absolutely.
and tell him, I get, but I'd rather be challenged, and I'd rather be challenged in court, and I'd rather, because, we're not gonna be the only ones doing this.
Agreed.
And this is gonna change.
You want to finish? We'll go through it just quickly, and then
Yeah.
we'll,
On the other thing is that, based on, what I see on social media of town sites and, letters we're getting, there's also a lot of there's people on both sides of this argument in this town that feel very strongly.
I know, but you,
all I'm trying to say to the board is, even if it's determined that the draft regulations become final regulations, there appears to be very few local options that can be taken.
Yeah.
And there's even fewer local options that can be taken that actually have any direct implication on
Yeah.
how many. So you're likely left with constraints that aren't gonna be zoning related, wetlands, how DPW handles the.
Sewer.
Right? It's not gonna be typical zoning issues.
Right.
Can we,
And that's exactly what how the state strategized this.
Yeah.
can we just walk through this, what will happen? So somebody comes with a proposal for an ADU. They go to the building inspector, if we follow what
Yep.
town
Plus
council's recommending.
his email from
So
today.
so they go to the building inspector, and they are looking for a determination that it does not increase the non-conforming nature. The building inspector may say it doesn't, or he may say, I think it does, in which case, if they disagree, then they appeal that to the ZBA. Is that right? And then the ZBA has as their framework that it's not a special permit, but what they are looking at is is this substantially more detrimental than the existing non-conforming structure to the neighborhood? That's their criterion. And so then they make a determination, they have a vote, and if there is a majority vote that the existing non-conforming structure will be more detrimental, then they will be denied.
Correct?
And that's what the town council's recommending we
Yes.
take. I think
But
that's
then
a,
if the
That's reasonable. I
proponent
think it's a very
of the
reasonable path.
structure, if the proponent of the structure doesn't agree that that was reasonable, then they'll be appealing that, and
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm fine with that.
yeah, but I mean, that's sort of the normal process.
Right.
So I think that's a very good suggestion, actually, because
Yeah.
that's really at the heart of what you would be considering in a special permit anyway.
It would still require a butter notification.
Yeah.
yeah.
A voting board of your peers, case, merits based upon the specifics of the situation.
Right, and and the building inspector has specific guidelines in E
Yes,
with regards to assessing whether it's non-conforming or
correct, and that
not.
has been working really, really well.
Right, okay.
If you recall,
So-
you were on the zoning board.
Yeah.
There were years when the zoning board was receiving a tremendous amount of applications, and then we created 195E that allowed a by right option, and which has significantly reduced
Yeah.
single-family homeowners from having to go to the zoning board.
Yeah, I think that's a very good suggestion.
Okay.
All right, so we've covered the procedure. I just want to go over a couple more things. The state law allows for site plan. The initial draft that I provided to council included site plan. It contemplated site plan for detached structures. Council's initial reaction, and he remains saying, given the size limitations for ADUs, the extensive site plan review criteria, in the board's schedule, he recommends not requiring site plan unless you have a specific concern you want site plan to address. And again, he goes back to, and he'll say this to you, do you require a site plan for current single families? Well, we do if we're over 4,000 square feet, but generally no. So that's where he's going back to,
So
I
then,
would,
the law requires you not to treat ADUs any more restrictively than you do a single family.
I would think screening would be landscaping/screening would be a very important issue, because you're talking about putting structures into places
Right,
that
so then-
previously wouldn't have really
Right,
have
so that's what I was
respected it.
thinking. And maybe we can articulate that. He'll likely say, are you able to develop a specific performance standard that if it's met, it wouldn't trigger site plan? Which is kind of what I did further down related to the accessible walkways and
Right.
things of that nature. So I guess we could, I mean, you could say it has to be a combination of fence and/or landscaping
Yeah.
that creates a
A visual buffer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
could do that.
I would definitely want
Yeah.
that.
and
I
regardless if
suggested.
it's, like, if the principal house and the ADU is over 4,000, does it automatically go for a site plan? Like, how do they
Yeah,
determine?
our current site plan regs say it's any gross square footage over 4,000 square feet on a single-family triggers site
So
plan.
what if you were 3,100, and now you're gonna put on a 900 ADU? So now you're triggering site plan review newly?
Yeah, I'll read it to you. Construction or exterior expansion of a single or two-family structure that will result in habitable space of more than 4,000 square feet on a lot, which held a single or two-family structure within the past 2 years.
So that automatically, that defaults, that still stays,
Yeah.
so, yep, like if you had like
Yeah, and
point
I'll bring that to council's
3,101
attention.
and added a
Yeah.
900 square foot, then it would automatically still
Well,
stay.
I mean, council's gonna have to review that. I don't know if we specifically talked about that. I think, I think we may be able to think about ways to articulate what are the concerns with a detached. And again, my initial draft, I did articulate them. I articulated on design, section D. My initial draft had had text related to where additional parking was required. It must use an existing driveway. It was essentially trying to restrict building an entirely new driveway for a detached ADU in the spirit of maintaining a single-family neighborhood character. And as you see in council's edits, he softens that a little bit. He was much more comfortable with a prohibition on no new curb cuts shall be permitted for an ADU. Curb cuts meaning at the street. Which makes sense, but we discussed, well, what if you have a detached ADU, it's rental, not family, the owner who lives in the principal, wants the ADU to have a separate parking area. This wouldn't allow a separate driveway, but now they have to pull the parking from the front of the house and, around to the back. So now you're creating all this new paving. So I was trying to figure out a way to prohibit that. So, and that's one example where maybe we can figure out, maybe we can articulate some very specific concerns related to detached. But like I said,
You would think even fire and safety, right? Like if it's, you would think that that would be an issue, like when they need to get there, like.
Well, so I did add, number 8, under design standards, detached ADU shall provide for adequate provisions for emergency services via a paved walkway from the ADU to a walkway for the existing single-family and/or a walkway with a connection directly to a roadway and identifiable from the street via mailboxes and/or address numbering on the building. That's taken directly from fire prevention's letters to the Zoning Board of Appeals for current ADUs. Again, does that warrant site plan? Council would probably say, well, if you can create a very specific design standard, then no. That kind of gives you a feel for where council is with site plan. I don't think council is going to hold the line and say absolutely no. If that's something that the board feels strongly about, then that's the way it will play out. But I think what he's sending, he's giving you some caution, saying you wouldn't be able to use your existing site plan submission requirements, where you have multiple plans. It has to be more of a minor site plan.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's.
Or can we create our own category of site plan for ADUs?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had initially had the LAA shall not have more than 2 bedrooms. I picked that one up directly out of Hudson. The state's been using Hudson as an example. And council writes,
Of a good town or a bad town?
Hudson's being used as an example of a town that already went to town meeting and revised their regulation to be compliant. They had this provision in there. So I said, oh, it must be good. Council says, I suggest omitting this. I understand it will be governed by the state building code, and where owner occupancy, I'm sorry, this one here. I would omit this. The town cannot regulate the interior of a single-family residence, MGL Chapter 40, Section 3.
Yeah.
And I believe the state intends that the size limitations in the state definition, together with the state building code and Title V as applicable, to be the sole limitation on size and occupancy. So it's another example of, to what extent do you talk about utilities and things of that nature?
But the state was happy with Hudson with their limit.
The AG approved it, but remember, that was prior to the draft regulations being issued. My initial, on parking, this is one that surprised me. The draft state regulations have a specific definition of bus station. And I think this is where the state may have learned a lesson with MBTA zoning. The state guidelines, the draft guidelines define a bus station as a location serving as a point of embarkation for any bus operated by a transit authority for routes that allow flag stop locations where passengers may signal for a bus stop at any point along its designated route. The entire route shall be considered a bus station.
Oh, lovely.
So it's not a bus station, it's a bus route.
It's a bus, yeah, bus
So
stop.
as-
If you have
so-
a bus stop.
so-
then they
No,
just
it's a
say,
route.
"Ooh," Yeah,
So,
Doesn't have to even be a
so the
stop.
reason this is applicable is that the draft regulations have very specific parking requirements.
Yeah.
If you are within a half mile of the bus route, no parking can be required. If you're outside a half mile, no more than one space can be required.
And they don't, so the Lowell Transit Authority would be under that.
Yes? Yes, yes. So I didn't know that when I drafted this initially. I knew that the state law said no more than one space. So my approach was, well, let's not require it, let's say they may. Because again, I thought we were trying to prevent more paving in a single-family neighborhood than what's required. So I wrote may, giving the property owner the
Option.
option of whether they thought they needed additional parking.
yeah.
Because remember, it's not just the parking space, it's also the maneuvering
Right, right.
pavement that's needed. It adds up pretty quickly. Well, you know, council's edited this section as well, and his edits basically copy and paste the state law. So again, if that's something that the board wants to allow a may, we're gonna have to revisit that with council. So there's a variety of, I think, design criteria that we can discuss with council to try to provide more predictability related to potential impacts.
So what does the state law say? Like, you don't have to have, no parking spaces is required.
Within a half
Within a
mile of
half.
the bus route.
Okay, so he wants to put that in versus you may,
He did take out may, because in number 3, he wrote, not more than one additional off-street parking space shall be required for each ADU. I had may in there. He removed the may and reinserted the shall, which is what the state law says shall. But my understanding, you can be less restrictive, not more restrictive.
But this is not more than one shall be required. You
Right.
had more than one may happen, right? Or
So
something.
my
like-
intent was that it was completely optional. That was my intent.
Well,
Parking.
it still is. We just can't require it.
What's completely optional? Having a parking space?
Yes. I'm not sure that's how it's worded. If someone goes into the building commissioner with a by right ADU,
There's no parking.
won't the commissioner say, where is your one space if you're outside of the half-mile bus route?
No, it says not more than one shall be, not more than one shall be
Right, so
required.
one is required.
oh,
Yeah.
so he's saying that we have to put one?
That's what the state law says, yes.
Oh, and he's
Yes.
saying we,
My initial take on this was, we acknowledge that the law requires you to have one, but locally, we're saying it's your option. We're not going to require you. It's the applicant's option in an effort to
I see.
reduce
Oh, yeah.
paving and parking.
yeah, no,
and-
we should go back on this one, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's another
Yeah.
topic for conversation. On the other hand, if the law is going to be expanded to 2s, 3s, 4s, there are neighborhoods in town where you actually do need the off-street parking.
Right.
If we're able to restrict it to single family, then maybe parking isn't,
Yeah.
right.
We
Right.
can be less restrictive?
Why don't we come
thought-
back to
I
that
thought-
when we
Oh,
have
let's
council?
see,
I thought we could be more restrictive, we just can't ever be less restrictive.
I thought in something like
Oh,
this,
something like this.
yeah.
That we can
yeah.
be less restrictive, like, this says you are like, that seems weird that they require, like, it's, because that would be almost like,
Yeah, I mean, it's another
Right, but-
clarification needed from council.
But I think,
My recollection is that we can't be less restrictive. But.
No, you're right,
Yeah.
Yep.
but I think in most places, we do want off-street parking.
At the time when I wrote that, I just assumed it was dedicated, restricted to single family. I think if you're in a typical single-family neighborhood of Chelmsford, most single-family houses have a driveway that can handle four cars
cars,
probably.
yeah, you don't want-
Tandem.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want.
But is there any place where we wouldn't want parking?
The issue, I don't think the issue is parking, but remember, if it's for detached, and if it's for rental, or even if it's not rental, that detached structure is likely gonna be in the side or the rear. So that's a pretty long driveway.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
want, like.
And so
you want
Evans-
room.
Evans-
the entire driveway's not needed
Reducing
for
the
parking.
impervious is what he's.
I get that, but, so that detached ADU would require on-street parking then? If we don't require a parking space, and we're pushing to not have a parking space for that detached ADU,
But they'd have to
He said-
figure it out.
He would said may,
May,
like, that way
right.
it gives you the option.
What
So
I was trying to avoid, particularly for detached,
Was
was putting in the driveway,
forcing the driveway.
because people like to park,
Because you're
close to
making
their
them
front
Yeah.
door.
do that.
He was
And I
giving
was
the option.
suggesting that you would just put, you would attach some new paving to your existing driveway, just enough to accommodate the additional one or two
Right.
parking spaces for an ADU.
right, and that's my point, is that requiring one additional off-street parking space for the detached ADU would force people to make that space, whether it's off their driveway or a long thing. But if we don't require one space, they're not gonna pave it, and then we're gonna have all kinds of other issues with on-street parking.
You could.
Like
You
Palin.
could. You could.
You're saying.
I think what council is suggesting, just based upon some of his edits here, is that he's most comfortable with simply saying no additional curb cut. And he seems to be okay with the language that he left in there that says, an off-street parking space shall have vehicular access to the existing driveway. A separate driveway shall not be permitted for an ADU.
So basically,
So that's reducing pavement, but it's not being as restrictive as you possibly, it's kind of a working compromise.
Yeah, but that's why I also like that not more than one off-street parking space shall be required, because
yeah.
it is forcing us to have a parking space there,
Yep.
whereas putting in may gives the option, and I don't think we should give the option in
no,
town.
but hold on a second. So let's play this out, right? Say you have an elderly parent and you want them to come, whatever, live in your house. They don't drive.
Yeah.
Why would I need to expand
Exactly.
my driveway?
They never have visitors?
No. They're, 95 years old and have Alzheimer's and don't know where they are, but I want to take care of them.
Except, that's fine, except if a developer comes in, they want to save money, they're not putting in an additional space. And they're renting out both units. So now we have a ton of developers coming in, which we've already said is likely to happen,
Yeah.
saving money, and we get a ton of on-street parking now.
But if we said may, wouldn't that option, or no? we
No, it gives them the option.
Yeah, it gives them the
can't?
option.
Okay, all right,
And you can't distinguish between
Okay.
rental and non-rental.
okay,
Right.
So then we
So
get
we're-
a ton of on-street parking now where we,
So
Okay,
we're
all right.
requiring the one
Convince
space,
me,
we're trying to
got it.
figure out a way to.
you got
and
it.
if we get into the situation where there are two families doing detached without an additional space,
Okay, you convinced me, that's all.
So I think that covers
Win.
the highlights, the lowlights.
You guys must have an interesting Thanksgiving, that's all I
No,
can say.
don't talk about this stuff at all.
Okay,
What do you want to do about pursuing a special town meeting, which would require a special meeting with council, or,
I think we should have another special meeting there. We just talk about this with council. And I guess the question is, do we want any public input? I'm not sure we do. I mean, that will be a town meeting, I guess.
I would invite the public. If you choose to move forward, you're going to be required to hold a public hearing.
Oh, true, right.
Zoning public
Okay.
hearing.
Okay, so do you think we could tackle this in an hour?
No.
I would think you could do it in 2 hours, a
2 hours,
dedicated
okay.
work session
We
with
might do it.
council.
Okay, could we, it has to be done by January 2nd. So I would propose that we do it next Wednesday.
Double book next Wednesday. I've got to
What?
get 2 meetings next Wednesday at the same time.
Oh,
Well, next week is a good week to try to do the meeting.
Yeah.
I can do, any other day next week?
Well, let's see.
Except Wednesday.
Monday, do we have?
yeah, I have a meeting Wednesday too, but
Monday, you have strategic plan.
I've got strategic, but I could always do it after that.
Yeah.
That's.
Well, we should probably pick 2 days to give
what's
council.
strategic plan? What date, what time is that?
Monday till 7.
Yeah, it's fairly short, 5:30. So it's not a
Monday at 7?
I can do Monday at 7.
I cannot.
Tuesday.
Tuesday I can do.
That I can do.
I can do
I can do it.
Tuesday. Pretty
I
sure.
think I can.
And do you want to give council a backup date?
I can do Thursday or Friday.
Same.
Same.
Thursday?
Or Friday.
Yeah, I would prefer, if we're gonna do Thursday, I'd like to do it a little earlier, like 6:30, 6 even? 6:30?
I'm generally free all day Thursday.
Okay. So first preference is the 17th, Tuesday.
Yeah,
Second preference is Thursday, the 19th.
yeah.
Okay. If you have any specific questions, just email them to me. That way I can forward them to council.
Perfect, thank you.
Questions and suggestions, I'm
Anything,
assuming?
yeah, really, anything, yeah.
So you're going to work on the MBTA, rewriting that. So if we were to do a special town meeting, we would do ADUs and MBTA?
We could, I don't know if that makes the most sense, but, I mean, we could. I don't know if the planning board, the moderator, and everyone involved in the special town meeting, I don't know to what extent they want to be, bothered by anything other than
I think
ADU.
ADU.
You're right, right.
I think we
ADU is-
just
gonna
want to
take a while.
focus on that alone. Otherwise, people will get confused and then get
So then
crazy.
at springtime meeting, we have MBTA update and then the flood? Okay,
And then Kate's Corner if we get to it.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's, we're doing the budget in the spring.
Yeah.
So that's usually, we're not happy with
Heavy
heavy
lifting.
zoning on zoning. But if it's an easy thing,
Yeah, those three would be fairly easy.
Mhm.
This one is going to be the more complicated.
yeah.
Okay. Shall we move along to minutes? People have a chance to look at the minutes. I know there was one place Casey's name is spelled wrong on page 3 of the first one.
Yeah, and then that same one, that's November 13th, was just a spelling thing I was going to send to Becky. It's probably from the AI program. Morose is misspelled near
Oh,
the
yeah.
end. Oh, I can send
And then I sent 2 updates to her as well on 10 Independence on the 13th meeting. It mentions 4-way stops, but those are really 4 parking stops. They're wheel stops, not 4-way
Yeah.
stop signs.
Yeah.
And then the liaison for Concom report was that we held the continued hearing for Palet, but the 10 Hildreth was continued without discussion.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 changes I sent to her.
Perfect.
We might as well just vote them and get them out of the way.
Yeah, take a motion.
I move that we approve the first of the minutes.
13th? November
13th.
13th?
Second.
Okay, motion by Mike Griesbeck, second by Anita, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
I move
Take a
we
motion for the
approve
20th.
second of the minutes.
motion by Mike,
Second?
second by Chris, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we're gonna get back about the next meeting dates. Take a motion.
You want a motion for?
Adjourning.
Oh, that one. Okay, do we? Are you sure you want to go through with adjourning? I move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Anita, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.